Senorita by I-DLE features such attractions as a tuba falling from the sky, unsafe use of electrical devices, and a metrically disorienting rap by Soyeon. Let's discuss these in reverse order in this first episode of Classical Composer Breaks Down the K. So if you're like me, the first few times you listened to Soyeon's rap in Senorita, you might have become confused as to where the beats were. To understand this, let's take a look at meter. Most pop songs are in 4/4. Each measure has 4 beats, called quarter notes, because they're each a quarter of a whole note, which is the length of a full 4/4 bar. These quarter notes can be divided into 2 subdivisions, and those can be further subdivided in another 2, forming 4 subdivisions of the quarter notes. 4/4 tends to be the most stable meter. 4 times 2 makes for 8 initial subdivisions, but those 8, helpfully called eighth notes, do not have to be grouped equally as 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. For example, they can be grouped into 3 groups of 3, 3, and 2/8 notes. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Other divisions of 8 into 3 unequal groups exist, but the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 pattern is used most frequently, and is particularly common in Latin-influenced songs. And just as eighth notes can be grouped unequally, so can the 16 subdivisions one level down. You'll never guess what those are called, unless you guess that they're called 16th notes, because that's what they're called. With 16 subdivisions, many groupings are available, but a particularly common one is groups of 3, 3, 3, 3, 2, and 2. Now, you might remember that the aforementioned grouping of 8 was 3, 3, and 2, and this is 3, 3, 3, 3, 2, and 2. So it's really just splitting the previous groups down the middle. So rather than 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. As in CLC's song, I Need U. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And this is what Soyeon sounds like she's starting to do, a rhythm emphasizing groups of 3/16ths. 그냥 넌 나에게만 집중해봐. Or to slow it down, 나에게만 집중해봐. And you expect her to wrap up the measure with a group of 4/16ths, or 2 groups of 2/16ths, so that they all add up to 16, 4 groups of 3, and then 4. And then the next measure starts on 1. Something like 그냥 넌 나에게만 집중해봐 하니 둘 땅. But Soyeon says no. She just keeps going with these groups. She does 22 of them. Well, sort of. Over the course of doing this rap, Soyeon slows down by about 10%. Senorita is at 120 BPM, that is 120 quarter notes per minute. But by the end of her rap, Soyeon has slowed to about 108 BPM. But the drums, sparse during the rap and coming in with a full pattern 4 measures later, never leave 120 BPM. So the song stays in 4/4 at 120 BPM throughout, and most of the rap happens over the course of 4 measures, a standard length of phrase. But Soyeon is, throughout the rap, in a different implied meter, technically 12/16, but that's just terminology, and in an increasingly different tempo from everything else. There is precedent for having different parts simultaneously in different tempi. Charles Ives, in his piece The Unanswered Question, composed roughly a century ago, had the trumpets and winds playing in a different tempo from the strings. And more recently, Martin Los's accordion concerto titled In Liquid has the accordion at times speeding up independent of the orchestra's tempo. Links to both are in the description. But when people write pop songs, the parts are normally, in the same tempo and meter as each other. But while other people were putting their parts in the same tempo, Soyeon, an intellectual, went, what if no? What if I put them in different tempi? What then? Had she kept the 4/4 beats clear throughout the rap, everyone would have heard the underlying 4/4 pattern. But the drum part is thinned out to only an occasional kick drum and a few metrically ambiguous clusters of hi-hats. After a few beats, with so little to reinforce the previous 4/4 and such a clear repeating pattern in Soyeon's rap, emphasizing beats that are 3/16 notes long, her beats start to sound like the main beats, not those of the preceding 4/4. Also, supporting this, Soyeon's rapping is particularly incisive. This also explains why the rhythms she used for the rap are so repetitive. With both the meter and tempo pulling out of alignment with those of the song overall, if Soyeon had used more complicated or varied patterns, it would have risked sounding like she was just placing syllables arbitrarily. As it is, she is unambiguously rapping just to her own beat. And thus, when the old 4/4 is reasserted at the end of the rap, that also feels like a destabilization, because the first beat of the 4/4 measure falls in what feels like the middle of a beat of Soyeon's rap. We generally talk about consonance and dissonance in terms of harmony, with dissonant or less stable harmonies implying a resolution to consonant or more stable ones. In this case, the principle applies to rhythm. The instability of meter and tempo during Soyeon's rap resolves, after a moment, to the comparative stability of the 4/4 groove. And this is why music must be thought of as a listener, not just on paper. I can explain these ways that her patterns relate to the prevailing 120 BPM 4/4 meter of the song, but it feels, when listening to it, like the patterns in Soyeon's rap, rather than those of the song overall, are the real meter. As she says, "Na egamen tiptunghepa," just focus on me. As for proper handling of electrical devices, don't drop them in a puddle of water while they're powered. Experiencing an electric shock won't make FX come back. As for proper handling of brass instruments, don't launch them to high altitudes. I'm looking at you, Dewey. You have to be careful with catapults. You should know Momoland is close to Neverland. That's property damage. It's probably not that significant compared to what they did with burning the building down and all that, but still, that tube is going to drop almost as hard as the chorus of Pop Stars.